miracle. The journal demonstrates the political culture of the 13 states operating under the Articles of Confederation, but also their willingness to abandon the firm league of friendship as their union was described in the Articles. States jealously guarded their own perceived interests. Conflicts between the large states, such as Virginia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and New York, and the smaller states, Delaware, for example, were inevitable. The South, long dependent on the evil institution of slavery, was fearful of the mercantile, abolitionist North and of farmers who worked their own fields. This conflict emerged in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which prohibited slavery in the new territories. For a time, the outcome of the convention was in serious doubt. But the convention's ultimate success, as Mr. St. John ably demonstrates, was largely attributable to the skill and statesmanship of the delegates in dealing with what seemed at the time to be intractable problems. Heated interchange and vigorous disagreements were constant throughout the convention, but the spirit of compromise and unsurpassed creativity and ingenuity ultimately prevailed. That creativity and ingenuity sprang from the minds of extraordinary men. The journal conveys a sense of the personalities of the delegates. We are able to witness the quiet leadership of George Washington as the crises of the convention unfolded and were resolved. Young Madison, in many ways the driving intellectual and synthesizing force behind the Constitution, is presented as a staunch advocate of his home state's interests, yet also as a statesman concerned with a true federal union of the states. The journal also presents lively portraits of delegates perhaps less recognized in the history books, but nonetheless crucial to the framing of the Constitution. Gouverneur Morris and James Wilson of Pennsylvania and Roger Sherman of Connecticut are three names that come to mind. This is a book the Commission on the Bicentennial is placing in the library of every high school and college in the country, and in other libraries. And adding to the value of this original version is an appendix of hard-to-find copies of the Articles of Confederation and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Young Americans and their teachers will find this volume very useful to an understanding of our great Constitution and how difficult it was to get it. Warren E. Burger, Chairman, Commission on the Bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution, Chief Justice of the United States, 1969 to 1986. Preface. The Constitutional Time Machine. How would the Constitutional Convention of 1787 have been influenced or affected if the secret sessions had been leaked to and reported by the news media of 1987? How would a newspaper or broadcast correspondent have covered the most complex and critical political story in American history if he or she had inside information about the daily debates and access to personal diaries and letters of the delegates? This work is one reporter's answer. 124 journals of the day-to-day debates of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia that officially met from May 25th to September 18th, 1787. Each is written as if this author were transported back to Philadelphia in a time machine to the summer of 1787. Using modern reportorial techniques, the convention that created the U.S. Constitution is treated like an evolving news story, not much different from the debates the author has covered in the U.S. Congress. For instance, the reportorial techniques used are, a source says, this correspondent has learned, a copy obtained by this correspondent, an observer notes, allegedly, James Madison is reported. The journal is written in the present tense, and spellings in direct quotes are carefully retained to preserve further the reader's sense of reading today's news. Personal opinions and interpretations of the correspondent have scrupulously been avoided. All interpretations by observers are footnoted. Each day's closing comment is a journalistic touch used in contemporary times, but it is often suggested by possible forthcoming events during the convention. The journal was almost 2 years in preparation and is based on the documented record of the convention debates and supplemented by scholarly works. 17 published works on the convention were used, and over 40 additional histories of the period and biographies were consulted. As a print and broadcast journalist during the last 30 years, I have covered in Washington, D.C. the political institutions created by the Convention and concretized in the Constitution. Having written on historical subjects for print and broadcasting, I came to realize that I had only a superficial knowledge and understanding of the origin of the political institutions that daily affect my life and the lives of millions of Americans. I soon found that I was not alone. Most Americans know there was a convention in 1787 and know about the Constitution it produced, but know almost nothing of the process that went into the Constitution's creation. Professor Michael Kamen, in A Machine That Would Go of Itself, The Constitution in American Culture, Alfred A. Knopf, 1986, maintains that most Americans do not understand the Constitution, and many equate it exclusively with the U.S. Supreme Court. The subject of the Constitution, Dr. Kamen insists, is too often poorly taught in the schools, and textbooks on the subject tend to be unclear, superficial, inconsistent, and even inaccurate. For almost 2 centuries, writes the Cornell University historian, it has been swathed in pride, yet obscured by indifference. A fulsome rhetoric of reverence more than offset by the reality of ignorance. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 is a difficult and demanding story to tell, largely because it involves a multitude of elements, ideas, issues, and personalities. One historian has estimated that if a verbatim transcript had been made of each session of the 4-month convention in the summer of 1787, consisting of some 400 hours, it would probably fill at least 50 volumes. In this century, dozens of books devoted to the Convention and the Constitution have been published, most of them of a scholarly nature. Many of these works I have relied on in creating the journal, describing the daily process of the Convention in a reportorial style, much as I have done in covering the national conventions of both American political parties since 1960. The reason I chose this approach was to try to produce clarity out of complexity, providing the accurate essence of what transpired, and at the same time show the delegates' ordeal of summer statecraft as a profoundly human as well as historical drama that changed American and world history. The journal is an effort to provide a concise composite of one of the most important news stories in history, a complex and compelling political drama that remains relevant today. By using modern journalistic techniques and writing as if I were in Philadelphia 200 years ago, the story takes on a reality that sometimes is lost when cast in the context of an event 2 centuries ago. It also reads like a mystery as the reader moves swiftly through each journal, wondering what might happen next. The reader will discover, as did the author, that the convention might easily have turned out entirely different from the way it did. It could have ended in failure for half a dozen reasons, narrowly escaping dissolution during angry disagreements. We should also remember that the framers of the American Constitution had none of the modern tools of communications that our current political leaders and press take for granted. The framers, for example, did not have access to lending libraries, computer data systems, high-speed printing presses, radio and television, nor even the telephone and telegraph, tools that might have assisted them in creating a document that has endured for 200 years. When viewing their achievement in this context, one has to stand in absolute awe of how they achieved so much in so short a span of time by their collective human intelligence. The framers brought to their ordeal of creating a new government an understanding of the past, a common-sense view of the possible in 1787, and the profound belief that it was possible for human beings to create a framework of freedom that might endure in the future. The convention was as much a drama of human reason as it was an act of faith that personal liberty and the rule of law, not of men, could serve their own time and future generations of free Americans. Initial research for the journal was underwritten by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to the American Studies Center, Washington, D.C. The entire series has been reviewed by a panel of 8 scholars and historians for historical accuracy and integrity. The journal's original